Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, Twitter was triggered yesterday on the 4th of July by the tweeting of the Declaration of Independence. And coming up, we're going to tell you about the founding father of Facebook, or I guess we should call it Fakebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who put out kind of a declaration of dependence on the government. But let's take a look first at the tweeting of the Declaration of Independence that got so many people so upset. It was done by, of all people, NPR. NPR for the last 29 years has had hosts, reporters, and commentators read the Declaration of Independence on air on the 4th of July. They decided yesterday for the first time that they would tweet it out, I guess 140 characters at a time. Actually, it's one phrase at a time. And this is some of the feedback they got. NPR is calling for a revolution. Interesting way to condone violence while trying to sound patriotic. You know, let's stop there for a second. When I was with the Libertarian Party, we would all talk with each other and say, you know, one of the sure ways to make people think that you're dangerous and to get the government to start following you and listening to your emails is to just quote the founding fathers. That makes you sound like a very dangerous person. Those guys were dangerous. They were dangerous because they took liberty seriously. And we'll be dangerous if we take it seriously as well. We'll be dangerous because we will have a revolution, hopefully a peaceful one. But we are not going to be given our liberty. But they said, hey, you're condoning violence. Well, actually, violence had already begun. It was the British who had begun it on April 19th, and that was one of the reasons why they put together this Declaration of Independence on July the 4th. Again, somebody else said, literally, no one is going to read 5,000 tweets about this trash. NPR listener thinks the Declaration of Independence is trash. Another one says, NPR, this is why you're going to get defunded. Well, let's hope they get defunded, but not for putting out the Declaration of Independence. Let's take a look at a couple of these other tweets that we have here. This is in response to the phrase, all men are created equal. Oh, that triggered them pretty bad because they talked about men. I guess they should have something like all LGBTQs are created equal. Not so much white men, especially white men. Anyway, one person says, when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'm going to compel him to include women in the sequel. And another person said the original author forgot to place white in between all and men. That's what they thought. That's what their actions showed. So there you go. Triggered the liberals. Then going on to the part, the next phrase, endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. Oh, there's a problem there because these are people who don't really like the idea that we have a creator or that the government doesn't give us our rights. So this person here says, their creator can be interpreted as God, but it can also mean their parents. Oh, really? Maybe not. Maybe not if the parents want to have an experimental treatment under single payer, just like we see with Charlie Gard. They're not going to let him go get independent experimental patients. They're not even, after they determine the day and the manner of his death, they're not even going to allow them to have the freedom to go home to die, even if they're willing to pay for it. So I don't know that the parents give us our inalienable rights. That certainly is not the case for most NPR listeners. They would not give parents the freedom to choose whether or not their children are going to be vaccinated or how their children are going to be educated. They want to make sure that the government does the educating. Let's take a look at another one of these. GOP, this includes health care as a right. And again, this is an important thing to understand. The difference between what liberals and libertarians or conservatives mean by rights. See, the liberals look at rights as free stuff. We're looking at it as freedom. They call it positive rights. They're positive that they have a right to get something from you. We're saying we have a right to be left alone. And that was the way that the founders talked about this. And of course, it was interesting to see that Obama, we had clips of Obama before he became president, talking about the difference between these different forms of rights and, of course, rejecting the idea of rights as put out by the founders of this country and then pushing for entitlement programs to say, I'm entitled to you providing this for me for free or to you being paid because I'll steal the money from somebody else to have you paid for this. Then another one from somebody who has the handle actress and activist. She said, the most important of these is life. And without your health, your liberty and your pursuit of happiness are severely impaired. I wonder if she is pro-life, but we did have some people who got it. Some of them came back and said, note that it is creator, not rights selectively granted by government. That's what we keep trying to explain to people. Also note, they said cell phones, Wi-Fi, and Cadillac healthcare are also not your rights. Again, this is the difference in the way liberals, conservatives, and libertarians understand rights. Another one says, Declaration doesn't have any force of law. She pushes back. She says, our laws begin with the Constitution, and we can have universal health care if we choose to. See, this is the living document idea of the rule of law, and the idea that with a democracy, we can do whatever we want to. Forget about this republic idea. Forget about the Bill of Rights, any of that stuff. And one person corrects that and says, actually, the Constitution says any powers not specifically granted to the feds belong to the states and citizens. So, no, constitutionally, you can't have universal health care, but that's what they're pushing for if this all goes down the drain and we don't get a repeal of Obamacare and it continues to fail because it is unsustainable. But speaking of unsustainable, we have Mark Zuckerberg, again, defending the government giving people free money. He went to Alaska, and as he came back from Alaska, he wrote yet another blog post defending the idea of establishing a form of universal basic income in the United States. Zuckerberg said he supported Alaska's permanent fund dividend. This is something that takes money from the state's oil, which they never put into private hands. They've kept the dividends from that, and then they turn it out each year. They decide how much they're going to pay. This last year, it was just over $1,000. And he had this wonderful insight. He said, organizations think profoundly differently when they're profitable than when they're in debt. Oh, you think so? Really? He says, when you're losing money, your mentality is about survival. But when you're profitable, you're confident about your future and you look for opportunities to invest and to grow further. Well, that's the issue, isn't it? And we just had Alaska go up to this last Friday without a budget because they couldn't decide what they were going to do with a shortfall. See, the problem is this. Even though Alaska has got vast reserves and resources and a lot of money that they put into this fund from prior years, we've now had plummeting oil prices as well as declining production in Alaska. And that's creating something of a problem. Their latest production has been 500 million barrels per day in 2014 from a peak of more than 2 million barrels per day in the late 1980s. So it's only a quarter of what it was in the late 1980s. And they said in order for them to have the kind of income from this oil that will balance their state budget, they're going to have $110 a barrel oil. That's not happening with the other sources of oil that we have. And so their dividend last year, as I said, was just over $1,000. In 2015, it was $2,000. So it went down by over 50% in just 1 year. So that's the sort of thing that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't realize, that with socialism, you eventually run out of other people's money. And the problem with universal basic income is that it does create dependency. It doesn't make you more engaged. It creates dependency. It was very well documented by Charles Murray when he talked about entitlements and welfare. The name of the book was Losing Ground. And it was a basis for massive welfare reform during the Reagan administration. But now that same economist who puts himself out there as a libertarian is pushing the idea of universal basic income. It is population control, folks, and they really know it. Now let's talk about the other Declaration of Independence that we need, and that is one of a independence from Obamacare. Is there anybody in Congress that will give us a Declaration of Independence from Obamacare? Ted Cruz has put out a plan that they say will be the key to unlocking health care votes. They say that he's put in a provision that would allow insurers to sell plans that do not comply with the Obamacare insurance regulations, so long as they also sell plans that comply with those rules. Cruz says giving insurers a path around the regulation should allow them to offer some plans at a lower cost. Now, this is similar to the MacArthur Amendment that was in the House that would allow states to apply for waivers. Why are we giving so much power to Washington over our health care that we dictate this to the extent that states have to apply for waivers? This is exactly the opposite of our Constitution, if any of these people would read this. Now, we have to have repeal. We can't have the idea that we're going to be begging to opt out of these mandates so that we have to buy whatever the insurance companies or the states or the federal governments mandate to us. You know, we have some inalienable rights, and among those are life and the liberty to pursue our health care. That is a key right that we need to take a look at. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.
We're selling a product, DNA Force, that is the very best nutraceutical that we can produce. Dr. Group, you took years for you to develop DNA Force for us.
It's been something that I've been working on for a long time, Alex, because I think it's very, very important. What the aging process is when the cell replicates, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. Telomeres are the little cups on the end of our chromosomes.
And when it runs out, you start dying.
We chose the PQQ because it has over 175 different clinical trials. It's one of the most effective substances in the world. It works like an antioxidant. It works to repair nerve growth factor.
So this is a formula to deliver the maximum amount. It's in powder form.
We have so many 5-star reviews. I take this. This is the product that I take.
InfoWarsLife.com, and the profit we make, we fight the globals. We fight the New World Order. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.